Okay. So I hope everyone can hear me. I think my wife is on here as well. Kate, if you guys can hear me, give me a thumbs up. All right. I hope everyone can hear me. Yeah, I'm good. It's been a long day today for myself and my wife. We been having a lot of issues with a lot of different things, and it's just a lot of confusion, a lot of just we believe we're under attack for whatever reason, you know. But it seemed to be working out, and everything seemed to be coming together. We don't frown upon these things. We know that this is part of our walk with the Lord, and we know these things must come, and we embrace it the best way we can through prayer and keeping our integrity, maintaining our dignity, if you will. But it can get pretty, intense at times. But God has us, and our dependence is upon Him and Him alone. So I'm here tonight to finish up what I had started in this here segment, if you will, of exposure. And like I've been speaking on, is basically the Democratic Party and their role, in the deception in the last days. And again, guys, I'm not doing this to blatantly attack, anyone, but it's obvious. I mean, it's obvious that there's something that's not right here. We understand we have a political system, we have a government, that should be working on behalf of the people. But when it comes to this particular party here, it doesn't seem to be that way. They seem to, want to control a people, want to bring them under some type of control and rule over them. There's been many types of games, if you will, that they've been playing against the American people. And I'm not, saying that the Republican Party is the best thing since sliced bread. I'm not saying that. But there are stark differences between the two. I mean, one is you have within the Republican Party, you have this political system, full of flaws and even some corruption in those things. But over here on the left, it seems to be a plan. There seems to be some satanic, sadistic plan that's going on here. It's just on another level, a different level than what you see with the Republican Party, in the sense of control, if you will. But there's a lot going on with that, and it has been going on since the very, beginning of this party. And I want to open up some of these things here, but I want to finish, what I had started on speaking last time we was here. And I just want to give you a more clear understanding of how these parties started and what their intent was. Because I don't believe it. I know, we was dealt a lie, a flat out lie with the Democratic Party. You'll find out what I mean by that. What I'm going to read here is not my own. I was listening to this one guy in my research. I had some material that I was going to bring, and present to you. But as I was searching my, in these areas here, I ran across this young man. I have his name here, and I highly recommend that you go out and purchase his book on how the Democratic Party started and what their intent were. Let me see if I can find his name here. And I just happened to run across him. I don't know him. I've never, followed him or anything like that. But when I did hear him, he's right on point. He speaks like we speak, or he has the same like-mindedness that I have and others on, the nature of the Democratic Party. His name, well, he has this book titled How the Democrats Won the Blacks from Physical to Mental Slavery. And his name is Robin G. Robinson II. I would encourage you to get this book that he has. It's very, I don't have the book. I've read some excerpts from it, and this is one, that he had, that's part of his book. And I think is very telling, and I think it would, shed a light on, this party and how they have been deceiving people. But yeah, I do highly recommend that you get his book. So there's parts of it that I want to read, and it's not his word for word. I kind of redacted some of the things and added my own side notes to it, so that I won't be accused of, taking his material. But he says for much of the 1800s, Black Americans were considered the literal property of white Southerners who formed the backbone of the Democratic Party. Some of this will sound very new to those who have been thinking that the Republican Party was or is the racist party, or the party that is against black and the party that enslaves black folks. So I want you to listen carefully, because that is a lie, and it always has been a lie. And you're going to see that we're dealing with some things that are not natural here, some things that are very spiritual. And there's powers here that if you're not born again, or if you're not willing to listen to truth, if you don't have an open mind or open heart to listen to truth, then you will remain in this grand deception. But he just breaks it out and tells it like it is. And he says the very foundation of the Democratic Party was built upon the preservation and expansion of slavery, reflecting the economic interests of the South, where slavery was integral to prosperity. And then he says, in contrast, the North developed along industrial lines and did not rely on slavery for its economic survival. This regional difference became a central issue in American politics, eventually leading to the creation of the Republican Party. Now, listen very carefully, and I have mentioned this here several times in this church. I said the Republican Party emerged specifically in opposition to the Democratic Party's pro-slavery stance. In other words, the Republican Party was created to knock off the Democratic Party for their position of enslaving black folks. The Republican Party wanted to end that, and they did. Eventually, they did. So this may be news to a lot of you guys. It says its founding mission was to halt the spread of slavery into new territories and ultimately to abolish slavery altogether. That was the purpose of the Republican Party, to abolish slavery, to end it. And they're still fighting that battle in a sense. And we'll see that here in a few. When Abraham Lincoln, who was a Republican, when he was elected president and sought to free all black Americans from slavery, the Democratic Party responded by seceding from the United States and forming the Confederacy. We used to tie the Confederacy in with the Republican Party, or those that are on the right. and that's not true. That's not how it happened. The Confederate flag, now commonly associated with white supremacy and racism, was in fact the symbol of the Democratic Party in the South, whose economic interests were deeply tied to slavery. This division led directly to the Civil War, which was fought between the Confederate States, which was representing the Democratic coalition, and the Union, which was led by Abraham Lincoln. And Lincoln himself stated that everyone understood this conflict was rooted in the issue of slavery. And this is interesting because a lot of people was saying that the civil rights conflict was not about slavery, or that it wasn't originally about slavery. But that's exactly what it was about, to end slavery, to eradicate it, and for the Confederate to keep slavery going. Confederate, i.e., Democratic Party, all right? During the Civil War, Black Americans joined white Americans in the Union Army, fighting side by side for the cause of freedom. Many lost their lives in the struggle to free enslaved black people. While there were Democrats who sided with the Union, their motivation was not to abolish slavery, but to preserve the United States as a single nation. In other words, they didn't want to have the United States divided into, the Confederacy and the Union. They wanted everything to be held together, but yet they still wanted slavery to be enforced. After the Confederacy, or the Democratic coalition, was defeated in the Civil War and all enslaved black people were freed, the period of Reconstruction began. Reconstruction, enacted by Republicans, aimed to integrate black Americans into society. But in response to this, the Democratic Party established the Jim Crow laws, which enforced segregation and restricted the rights of black citizens. And I don't know if you guys can see that even now, that this is still going on in an underhanded way. It's not as clear as it was back then, but it's still going on, where the Democratic Party is still trying to, segregate, if you will, blacks from white. And they're raising the issue of racist here, racism there. They're trying to keep that divide going. And many people are falling for it. Many people are listening to the lies, believing that racism is on this high scale, as they claim, when yes, of course, there's racism here and there, but it's nowhere near how they're trying to perpetrate it. It's just a flat out lie. I have a side note here. Senator Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, he recently described the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility, or the SAVE Act, as nothing more than Jim Crow 2.0, arguing that the proposal would disenfranchise millions of Americans, particularly black Americans, was his point. This is nothing more than political theater, guys. This is how they play the game, if you will. And they know if they can continue to use these rhetorics that they have been using, racism and Jim Crow and slavery and all these things, the Democratic Party know that they can get people on their side, black folks on their side, screaming foul, screaming, injustice. They know that. And so they throw these things out, as if it's true. But the very thing that they're saying, against the Republican Party on the issues of race, they are the one that's actually, doing these things. They're the one that established the Jim Crow law. When asked about this here SAVE Act, black Americans overwhelmingly state that this act does not interfere with their voting rights. In other words, the Democratic Party is saying, that this here act, it infringes upon, black folks from being able to get the proper identification in order to vote, that that they don't have enough money because they're minorities. See, that's a put down right there on the black Americans. They're saying that you guys, that we don't have enough money to buy to get an ID. And therefore this is racist. Therefore they're taking us back to Jim Crow, which the Republican never had anything to do with that. But that's a lie. I have ID. My wife has ID. All the people that I know that are black have ID. There's no issue here. It's a lie. The problem was that when they integrated the illegal immigrants, that would be now a situation where an ID may not be accessible to these people, and that was by design because the Democratic Party don't want them to have IDs. So I'm saying they don't want them to be independent. They want them to be, dependent upon the Democratic Party. So they would try and keep them from obtaining identification, but yet secretly have them voting for that party. It's a game, guys. So when asked, the blacks, said this doesn't interfere with us. Then, in fact, many expressed confidence in their ability to vote and view the proposed legislation as a non-issue rather than a genuine threat to their participation in the democratic process. See, no issue here. We're able to get IDs and everything. This contrast between political rhetoric and the perspectives of those directly affected highlights a broader pattern. While high-profile debates often invoke the history of voter suppression, such as the Jim Crow era, many citizens prioritize practical realities over political narratives. For these voters, the most important factor is whether they have fair or reasonable access to the ballot box, not the partisan framing of the issue. Many black Americans are waking up to the political theater spewing out from this party due to personal research and a true return to the God of righteousness. People are doing their own research now, looking into, these here political issues, and really taking a hard, true look into it, not just taking people's word for it, but doing their own research, and they're finding out, hey, something underhanded is going on here. How this party is labeling the black community as unable, to know, unable to think for themselves. No, this is wrong, guys. Listen to this. Among the most notorious actions undertaken by the Democratic Party during the post-Civil War era was the creation of the KKK, Ku Klux Klan. They are the one that created the Ku Klux Klan. The Democratic Party did. The KKK emerged as a white supremacist terrorist organization whose primary objective was to instill fear in black Americans and systematically prevent them from exercising their right to vote. Through violence, intimidation, and terror, the Klan sought to undermine the political and social progress that black Americans had achieved following emancipation and the passage of Reconstruction era amendments. By targeting black communities and those who supported black civil rights, the KKK became an instrument for enforcing white dominance in the South and maintaining the power structures that Reconstruction was aimed to dismantle. They didn't want change. They wanted to keep power, so they created, this terrorist network, the KKK, to put fear in the black people to keep them voting for the Democratic Party. That's what that was about. The Ku Klux Klan today, and this is my little addition, I added this to this here. The KKK of today presents itself differently than it did in the past. While the notorious hooded masks are no longer part of their appearance, the group's identity has undergone significant transformation. Rather than relying on their old methods and visual symbols, the KKK influence has adapted and reshaped itself in modern society. Al Sharpton and other contemporary civil rights leaders have taken on a role reminiscent of those who once instilled fear among Black Americans. Operating in the public eye, they present themselves as saviors and defenders of the Black community. However, this persona can be seen as a disguise. While they claim to act as liberators, their actions may actually suppress Black voices and perpetrate intimidation, echoing the tactics once used by the KKK. This is the new Ku Klux Klan, Black supporters of the Democratic Party, those prominent ones that are out there on the forefront, speaking as if they know right, and we should follow everything they say. These people are charlatans. They're working alongside these masterminds, if you will, that are trying to enforce this racist divide in this country. Al Sharpton, when he comes into a city, to represent someone that may have been unjustly, may have been wronged unjustly, however you say it, he comes in sometime on a private plane. It may be his own plane, I don't know. But I do know he comes on a private jet. And he leaves on that jet. And from what I understand, he has a mansion that he returns home to. And the man is a millionaire. He has a lot of money. But he's being paid in order to keep the Black folks in line, in order to keep this here, lie perpetrating, in their minds and things. They use the Al Sharptons and other prominent Black figures to keep Blacks suppressed, to keep them ignorant of truth and excluded from meaningful participation in the political process, ensuring that power stays within the Democratic Party. What's that other guy, that lawyer? I don't see my wife on here, but I forget his name. He's a part of them too. He comes in and tries to defend, someone that was seemingly wronged. In some cases, they were wronged, but not all the time, and not like they're saying, or they would say, Crump. I think his name is Ben Crump or something like that. He's in addition to the Al Sharptons. I can't speak on Reverend Jackson and Jesse Jackson anymore. He's gone, but he was a part of that as well. But yeah, these people are paid, representations or representatives of the Democratic Party. Many of these politicians and career politicians, because they've been voted in by many of them, are career politicians because they've been voted in by the minorities for several years, even though they have done nothing for the people. Because the Al Sharpton and those guys, they want the Blacks to keep voting for, the Obamas, the Bidens and the Harris and, and all those people who claim to represent them. These people do not represent the Black community. They don't represent anyone rightly. I'm still using my side note here. This guy wasn't saying this. These are the ones the Democratic Party turns to when they feel as though they are losing the Black supporters. And remember, Kamala Harris, she decided to try her skills at deceiving the blacks when she occasionally put on the black facade when running for president. There was time when she was black, when she was within the black community, and then there was times when who she naturally is, I think she was Indian or something like that, and she puts that on, when she's elsewhere. But these people believe that they could, do this to the black community because, they're not thinking for themselves. They believe that some of us are so, are simple-minded, that we, and all they have to do is either play the race card or claim to be black or claim to be supporters of the black, that they believe that would be enough to get their support. And that's a shame. Because ideally, that's been working for several years, and they believe that they can keep playing that game, and many of them are because they're taking ground like that because a lot of black folks they haven't woke up to the reality of what's really going on here. So back to what this guy was saying here. I want to give him his proper name here. Robin was saying, he says the Democratic Party implemented a range of legislative measures specifically designed to disenfranchise black Americans and maintain white supremacy in the South. One of the tactics used was the introduction of poll taxes, fees that citizens were required to pay before they could vote. Since many black Americans lived in poverty due to systematic discrimination and the legacy of slavery, these poll taxes made voting financially inaccessible for them. In addition, now we're talking about back in the day, in addition to poll taxes, Democrats established literacy tests that were administered at police stations. These tests were constructed in such a way that they were nearly impossible for many black individuals to pass, regardless of their education level. As a result, these tests served as another significant barrier to black political participation. Furthermore, the Democratic Party enforced grandfather clauses, which stipulated that only those whose grandfathers had voted before the Civil War were eligible to vote, since the ancestors of most black Americans had been enslaved and therefore legally prohibited from voting prior to the emancipation. This provision effectively excluded nearly all black people from the electoral process. What a strategy. These people have thought of it all, back in those days. They had it, planned out just perfectly in order to keep blacks from voting. Even when there was some freedom to do so, they put in certain clauses, to block them from being able to cast a vote. The Democratic Party used a series of tactics, like I said, including the poll taxes, literacy tests, and grandfather clauses. And they also used the federal troops, which were deployed to the South with the goal of, they also used the Ku Klux Klan, to also keep them from coming to the voting polls. Scared them off, scared them away. But in response to this here, in response to these barriers and violence, these violent groups, coming up against the blacks in the South, the Republican Party took decisive measures. Federal troops were deployed to the South with the goal of dismantling the KKK and restoring order. As a result of these actions, black Americans were able to reclaim their right to vote and regain political participation. So it was the Republican Party, that sent these troops to the South, to stop these here forces from disabling these black people from voting. And you know, this is another one of my thoughts, not in here. I just heard this, you know, that when there were slavery, that the slave masters, they kept the black folks from learning. They kept them from being able to read and, you know, and to have an educated mind. Again, so that they can control them, so they can lie to them, you know, and it's somewhat of that effect today, placing our young children in these public schools. Purposely, they want these public schools to be madhouses, to be like prisons, to be like these places where you go and all hell is breaking loose in these places. Many of the teachers spend most of their time trying to discipline or can't discipline or, you know, manage these children instead of teaching them. And this is by design, because the Democratic Party don't want them to learn, and especially learn the truth. That's why many of these, you know, curriculums and true, you know, books about history and things like that has been taken out of the public schools because they don't want them to know the truth. So another one of their plans, you know, to keep us dumbed down, if you will. Guys, it's a game, I'm telling you. The Republican Party played a pivotal role in advancing civil rights for Black Americans through a series of constitutional amendments and legislative actions. After the Civil War, Republicans passed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment to the Constitution. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery, granting freedom to Black Americans. The 14th Amendment established the right to equality, ensuring that all citizens, regardless of race, were afforded equal protection under the law. The 15th Amendment secured the right to vote for Black men, making a significant step towards political participation and representation for African Americans. This was all done by the Republican Party. In the mid-20th century, Republicans continued their commitment to civil rights by introducing and supporting landmark legislation. In 1957, the 1957 Civil Rights Act and the 1960 Civil Rights Act were both drafted and passed with overwhelming support from Republican lawmakers. These acts aim to protect voting rights and address ongoing discrimination despite strong resistance from the Democratic Party. I showed you guys a small clip of the State of the Union, but I'm sure most of you have seen it for yourself, you know, hopefully the entire thing. But these people, you know, anything that was good, that was done by Trump or the Republican Party, the Democratic Party never applauded. They just sat there, you know, angry, looking, you know, like they don't want to be there, and many of them didn't want to be there. But they should have been there to represent the American people. But that's not their interest. That's not their goal. Their goal is to continue to use people in order to keep them in those seats, in order to keep them in power. But these people showed no regards for the American people. And I remember, I think it was when Trump's first presidency, and he was talking to, it was State of the Union, he was talking to the groups again, and he mentioned that, you know, since he'd been in office, he had, you know, acquired many jobs for Black men, for Black people. And the Republican Party just erupted in applause. The Democratic Party, the Black Caucus, they just sat there with their arms folded. That showed that they didn't really care about Black folks. They don't want us to be independent. They don't want us to be able to take care of ourselves. They want us dependent upon them. And therefore, they don't pass certain laws like that to make, create jobs for blacks. They don't want you to have a job. Your job is to be dependent on their welfare system so that they can tell you when to jump and how high to jump. They don't want you to be independent. They don't want you to have the American dream. They don't want you to thrive for that. They want you to remain, in a poverty state. The 1964 Civil Rights Act is associated with President Lyndon B. Johnson, but its passage was made possible primarily through Republican support. Most of the opposition to this historic legislation came from the Democratic Party, which orchestrated the longest filibuster in United States history in an attempt to block its enactment. Ultimately, Republican efforts ensured the passage of the Civil Rights Act, which outlawed segregation and advanced equality for Black Americans. That was really done by the Republican Party. The Civil Rights Act, they are the one that overwhelmingly passed this thing, but the Democrats, they fought against it. But now they seem to have hijacked it to make it their own, to make it seem like they are, the heads of the Civil Rights Act. And in my opinion, I think they've abused it. I don't think the way that they're using it now, it was initially that way, when the Democratic Party had power over it. I'm sorry, when the Republican Party had power over it. I think it would have been on a whole other scale here, a whole better scale as well. Democrats did everything they possibly could to keep us enslaved, to oppress us, to separate us, and to stop our power in the United States. It wasn't until the jail incident with Martin Luther King in the 1960s who grew up as a Republican. His father, Martin Luther King Sr., was a lifelong Republican. Martin Luther King Jr. chose to leave the Republican Party and to affiliate himself with the Democratic Party, and all of Black Americans followed him. His decision was not based on lifelong loyalty from this party. It wasn't based on the proven track record of this party. It was based on an emotional decision of who helped him out of jail. Black Americans realigned, and from that point forward, because of federal assistance, welfare programs, and so on and so forth, all passed by Democrats, our community has been crippled, and we have become dependent on the Democratic Party. So quite literally, we were their property when we were slaves in chains, and today many Black Americans are still the property of the Democratic Party because we are dependent on them. So we are in mental chains now because this history doesn't make sense. That's a typo right there. But we're in mental chains now. Many of these Black folks are in mental chains. And this is what I want to talk about here in a minute here. But I want to finish this. The Democratic Party employed numerous methods to keep Black Americans oppressed, separated, and powerless. Their actions were aimed at maintaining control and restricting the progress of Black citizens. So now I want to talk just briefly about this mind control, right? Throughout history, the concept of mind control has played a significant role in shaping the experiences and perceptions of marginalized groups. In the context of Black Americans, mind control was not limited to physical chains and oppression. It extended to psychological manipulation and influence over thoughts and beliefs. This shift from physical bondage to mental dependence became evident as political realignment and social programs altered the trajectory of the Black community's relationship with power structures. Political parties, particularly the Democratic Party, utilized tactics that kept Black Americans oppressed and powerless. as the welfare system were introduced, many blacks Americans became reliant on these initiatives. While intended to provide support, these programs often resulted in increased dependency, leading to what is described as mental chains. The transition from physical to mental bondage illustrates how mind control can manifest in various forms, ultimately affecting the autonomy and empowerment of those subjected to it. They use these here system to put us into this dependency mind control type of thing. This dependency upon the government, and not to be able to look out from that and see that you can thrive from that. You can make something of yourself. These things can be used as a stepping stone, if you will, to if you hit hard time to get you back out there. But they're not meant to be something that you continue to live in and depend upon for you throughout your life. They're just there for a moment to help get you back out there in the workforce. But the Democratic Party has made it to where it could be your dependency. It can be something that you can maintain throughout your life. And therefore, you would never rise above poverty. You would never rise above, independence, and think for yourself and be your own person and make your own money and buy your own home or your own car or whatever. No, they don't want you to do that because, you just may find out, that you can do without them. And now you're on to maybe a different party. No, they don't want that. So we got to see some spiritual, some scriptures here for where we're going next. Satan blinds the minds of people by obscuring truth and fostering deception. This spiritual blindness prevents individuals from seeing the reality of their circumstances and the influence shaping their decisions. Through confusion and manipulation, Satan keeps people from recognizing the chains, whether physical or mental, that hold them back. This blindness is not just about ignorance, but about a deliberate distortion that hinders clarity and understanding, making it difficult for people to break free from oppressive systems or mindsets. Guys, this here is done through the powers of Satan to control people's mind, to take captive their thought, and to put them, in a certain spiritual or even natural bracket, if you will. It's done by spirits. In order to be able to control and manipulate a person and to sway them to think like you want them to think, versus what we do here, teach the Word of God and allow the Word of God to form and shape your thoughts. People led by Satan can do that to us, can train our minds to think the way that they want us to be swayed. The Bible tells us to pray that Jesus, would guard our mind and our hearts in him. That we cannot just be loose out here, just accepting and everything and hearing everything and, without aligning it with the Word of God. We just can't, be like that. We can't, just because a person is saying this, we can't just buy their words and just believe them, because they said it. Well, I know that's not true in many cases because I'm a black person and I say certain things and a lot of people don't listen to that. But I'm not saying it from my own point of view unless I tell you this is my point of view. But for the most part, I'm telling you what the Word of God says. And not many folks follow that. But they will follow someone that is prominent, someone that is well-spoken, someone that seems to be representing them, and all, because they can speak the language, or they can speak the certain words, that certain people want to hear. Oh yeah, they'll follow those people. But when you're speaking the word of God, no matter what your color is, unless that's who you really want to follow, you're not going to have people just follow you because of your color. And I don't think that's wise anyway. You should follow them because of the truth. So let's see what 2 Corinthians 4 has to say. Verse 1 through 6, it says, "Therefore, since we have this ministry, as we have received mercy, we do not lose heart, but we have renounced the hidden things of shame, not walking in craftiness, nor handling the word of God deceitfully, but by manifestation of the truth, commending ourselves to every man's conscience in the sight of God. But even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing, whose minds the God of this age has blinded, who do not believe, lest the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine on them. For we do not preach ourselves, but Christ Jesus the Lord, and ourselves your bondservants for Jesus' sake. For it is the God who commanded light to shine out of darkness, who has shown in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ." This is interesting what Paul is saying here. He is saying that there is a ruler of this world, and it's not God, not of this world system. This ruler is of this world system. God is not ruling this world system, but he's sovereign over all things. He's allowed Satan, to reign in a sense for a while, but his day will end soon. But God is overseeing it all, and he can intervene, when his time, when he's ready to do that. But for now, he's allowed Satan, to rule in a sense. But we still have the power of God here, the Spirit of the Lord here, for those that choose not to listen to Satan. You see? But Satan is here to blind the minds of those who do not believe, to cover your senses with deception, to keep you from knowing truth, to keep you in the dark, if you will. This is a military term, of a, and you see some in some combat, they use, especially in the old day, they used to use like grenades and things like that, to block the enemy from knowing, where you are, and then you can engage upon them. Well, this is what this blindness is like. It's like, a smoke screen, if you will. Satan is using a smoke screen to block the truth from people, to keep you from knowing facts from fiction. And the Democratic Party is using Satan through their manipulation to keep this fog in your mind and keep you covered from truth, so that you won't know what is real versus what is not real. Paul says, and we're not preaching ourselves, but we preach Christ, and ourselves as bondservants for Jesus' sake. For it is the God who commanded light to come out of darkness, to push away the darkness so that you'll be able to know the truth. But here's the thing. Paul is saying we ain't preaching ourselves, but we have preachers preaching themselves, and they're keeping people from the truth, from the light of God shining on them. There are many black pastors, and I'm saying this because my focus is on, the black community right now. They're preaching, activism. They're preaching blackness. They're not preaching the truth of God's word, and they're keeping people confined within this oppressive state of mind, because they're also working for the Democratic Party. This is a spiritual thing, and they know that black folks go to church, so they have to keep this lie, going even when people are in the house of God. They can't give them rest, because if they give them rest, they just might, think for themselves. So they have to continue to pour this oppression into them from every angle of life, that not even church is safe. Better be careful, because I'm about to show you something here in a minute. I'm kind of long-winded, and you guys can, you're home listening to what I'm saying here, or you may listen to it later, and you have the luxury, of pausing here and there and picking it up later, But I want to really talk about, what's going on here, and so I have the time to do it. But the church is not even safe anymore, because you have these people imitating, as righteousness, imitating, coming in, as manifesting as instruments of righteousness, instruments of God's people, and they're deceiving the people with this political facade, with this here lie that's been perpetrated from way back when. And when you have this spiritual blindness over you, and that's on a whole other level than that's just a natural blindness and misunderstanding. This is a level where now you are in bondage, spiritual bondage, and you need the power of God in both cases, but especially here, to deliver you from this here force, if you will. Because of this spiritual blindness, people may remain unaware of the forces at work in their lives, often mistaking bondage for freedom or dependency for empowerment. Such deception can lead to misplaced trust and loyalty, as individuals fail to discern who truly has their best interests at heart. It can also perpetrate cycles of oppression, as the inability to see the truth makes it harder to seek genuine liberation. Ultimately, overcoming this blindness requires a conscious pursuit of truth and a willingness to question the narratives and influences that shape one's worldview. Only by seeking wisdom and clarity can individuals begin to break free from the invisible chains that bind them, whether imposed by an external system or internal beliefs or internalized beliefs. So this is the game that the Democratic Party is playing, trying to deceive us on, who's really working for them and who's not. And they're trying to make it seem as if they're on your side and the opposition is against you. It's a trick. It's a mind game, that many of us have to learn. We can't believe everything we hear. We have to do our homework and search these things out for ourselves. Now, I'm getting down to one other segment that I want to talk about. It's not going to be long here. But again, I want to emphasize again to check out Robin G. Robinson II book, How the Democrats Won the Blacks from Physical to Mental Slavery. This is very important, okay? And I just want to say before I go to this next segment, which won't be long, that here, I've been called this, and I know I've been called this here in secret, perhaps, I don't know, amongst my family. I don't know, I hope not, but I wouldn't doubt it in some sense, because to be honest, we're not all on the same page. But I've been called an Uncle Tom, and that's supposed to be a derogatory, term, if you will. But guess what? I welcome that title, because just like a lot of blacks don't understand what happened, how the Democratic Party hijacked, the Civil Rights Act and hijacked all these other things, from the Republican Party and made it their own, even with this here, they've hijacked this here title, an Uncle Tom. and they made it a bad thing. But in her book, Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel, Uncle Tom is a martyr. He's not a sellout. His devotion was to his fellow slaves, and he made a sacrifice where he could have been free, but he made a sacrifice to stay, close to where the slaves were in order to give them freedom, in order to rescue them and hide them, from their master, in order to free them. And he did this in where he housed them in his cabin, Uncle Tom's cabin. So he's a hero. He's a good guy. He's a martyr. He took a chance, to help his people, the black enslaved, when he had when he had freedom, when he could have escaped and obtained freedom, but he hung out in order to help, to save the lives of many black folks. So yeah, I am an Uncle Tom because that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to help save the lives and the minds of many black folks, to get you out of slavery, to get you out of this here mental chain, part of the slave act, if you will, and get you rescued. But I can only do that, by speaking these things and through the power of God, and that you would do your own research and find these things out for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Look into these things and make it a habit to go behind people and search out what they're saying and see if what they're saying is true. Make that a habit, of your life. Don't just sit around watching CNN, NBC and MSNBC and all these here, propaganda news shows. Do things for yourself. There's alternative news that we listen to, or we get the real news and not the scripted fake news. And that's why we're talking from a different angle, because we're listening to another side. There's two sides to every story. So I want to end here with this here, and this is we're going just a little bit deeper now, because I've been seeing this here, and I really couldn't understand why this was so prevalent within the Democratic Party, why this was such an important policy that they had, and it was probably the top policy, the number one thing, that they utilize or they enforce. It's gonna open up some things to you guys, hopefully. But for some reason, the Democratic Party is obsessed with abortion. You ever notice that? That's all they talk about is abortion, protecting women's rights. Women don't have rights over another person. You see what I'm saying? But they would make you think that person that's in that woman's womb, that she has the rights to do whatever she wants with that person. That is another person. That is not her. She don't have a right. That's something that God has created, something that he has created in his own image. And when you feel that you have a right to take that unborn child, and destroy that child within the womb, or even when the child is outside the womb, because that's one of the other policies that the Democratic Party have, that you can abort your baby at full term. Once that baby come out, you get rid of it. But you don't have the right to do that. That's God's creation. He the one that allowed this to happen. And when we take that type of position to play the role of God, God's anger hovers over you. But it goes deeper than this because it's not just individuals, it's a whole political system that is designed around abortion. But it's bigger than what we think. And this is what the Lord showed me. But this is stuff you can find for yourself. But I'm gonna tell you later what the Lord showed me on this here thing. But you remember when Obama was first elected, the first thing he did was sign an executive order to release the ban that Bush placed on abortion. According to an article on January the 23rd, 2009, President Barack Obama on Friday lifted restrictions on U.S. government funding for groups that provide abortion services or counseling abroad, reversing a policy of his Republican predecessor, George W. Bush. The Democratic president's decision was a victory for advocates of abortion rights on an issue that in recent years has become a tit-for-tat policy change each time the White House shifts from one party to the other. In other words, when the Republicans win the presidency, there is a ban on abortion. Okay? But when the Democrats win, abortion becomes a free-for-all. They open it up for people to slaughter babies. When the ban was in place, speaking of when Bush had this ban in place, the article continues, no U.S. government funding for family planning services could be given to clinics or groups that offered abortion services or counseling in other countries, even if the funds for those activities came from non-U.S. government resources. So Bush had put a ban on monies from the government, from the federal government, going into these agencies and these clinics to abort babies. They couldn't do it. But not only here in America, but abroad, practically all over the world. And not only government money, but even, other monies coming from other sources. He put a ban on it. That's amazing. But as soon as President Obama became president, he lifted that ban. And when he lifted that ban, all over the world, babies began to be slaughtered. Millions of babies. I'm going to tell you why. So Obama says, concerning this, he says, for the past 8 years, the restrictions have undermined efforts to promote safe and effective voluntary family planning. Keep that word in mind, that phrase in mind. In developing countries, Obama said. Then he says, it is right for us to rescind this policy and restore critical efforts to protect and empower women and promote global economic development. Obama, he was such a strong advocate for abortion that he was dubbed the most abortion president ever. See, we don't know this. We got blinded by the blackness. We got caught up in this man being black and he's going to, to help support the black community. He did no such thing. In fact, like my wife always says, he was out there hobnobbing with, the Hollywood and those people. He wasn't really doing anything for the American people. He didn't even go back to Chicago to help rid crime in Chicago. Trump tried to do that. He tried to send in the National Guards to stop all this, gang-on-gang violence and them killing innocent people. But what happened? The Democratic Party blocked that. There was this crazy fight, to keep him from using, our military to help quell the violence in these cities, these crime-ridden cities. Who does that? First of all, who does that from that good side like that? But who does that from the evil side to stop it? That's crazy, guys, but that's what your Democratic Party did. They fought that. They couldn't, do it as strongly in Washington, but they did it in these other places. I have another take on that, but I'll save it for another segment. But yeah, Obama, he was dubbed, the most abortionist president ever. And remember, this is the same president who did the unthinkable. He adorned the White House with the LGBTQ plus rainbow colors. Do y'all remember that? God doesn't approve of that. He doesn't approve of that lifestyle. He loved the people just like we love the people. But that lifestyle is an abomination. But President Obama, he made that a national thing, by putting that on the White House, as though America, all Americans, the citizens here represent that or support that. No. We were furious when that happened. Many of us was. But there's a reason why he did this, other than, just advocating for the gay community. And even in that, there's a reason. I can't speak on that now. One day we'll talk about it. But you guys better do your homework on who this man really is and who his wife really is. It's coming out because this is the era of exposure. It will be revealed soon. We may not be privy to see this or hear about it, but it's going to be opened up. You're going to see here this last verse I have for us, one of the last verses. And then when Hillary was running against Trump, she campaigned that she would liberate women to do whatever they wanted with their unborn child, terminating the pregnancy even at full term. Remember that? She campaigned on this, that her main thing, her main focus was giving women right to abort their babies. And then Harris' entire campaign was run on reproductive health care, code phrase for abortion. That's what that meant. So I asked myself, I said, why? Why the obsession? Why are they so gung-ho on abortion? What is this all about here, man? Well, I believe it's no different than what they do in Hollywood. And what we have learned since the Epstein files and the Diddy revelation and all these other things that are coming out, that now we have privy to see what was going on behind the veil, behind the doors. A lot of sinister things, guys. If you go down that rabbit hole, be prepared, pray, because God's going to open up and show you, what has been going on in these places that we didn't know about until now. And there's a reason for this exposure. But in the Epstein files, in these Hollywood elites and all the things that they have been doing, to get famous, to get the best roles, 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 my country kicks in at times, and to make the money. These things just don't come naturally. They have to do something spiritually to acquire this type of power. It's no news now. Everybody know this now. Everybody, they're understanding what was going on behind the scene in Hollywood, in the music industry, and so forth. The Epstein files, I'm telling you, it opened up a whole other world for people to understand, the world of the elites, the world of the rich and famous, the world of the Oprah Winfrey. There's a lot I can say on that, guys. I'm just, nitpicking now on some things. But these people dabbled in witchcraft to get these positions, to get the power. And they also dabbled in sacrifices. And a lot of these here sacrifices were of children. A lot of these here sacrifices were from abortion. One reason why Harris wanted the border and Biden wanted the border to stay open was so that when the people come through unvetted, they're bringing children with them, and these are not always their kids. These are children, the cartel has given them, to bring across the border to America, because they're making deals with the elites. The cartels are to bring these children that has no documentation with them, and suddenly they just disappear. You don't know where these children are. Well, it's been discovered that a lot of these here kids have gone into the company of these powerful elitists and these actors and these prominent people in this world for various reasons. I can't say everything because I may have even crossed the line now with the algorithm and the YouTube. I don't know. But guys, there's a lot of sinister things going on behalf of these children, using these children. First, let's look at the command God gave in Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy 18, 9 through 14, God says, when you come into the land which the Lord, or Moses says, when you come into the land which the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not learn to follow the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire. That was abortion back in those days, or child sacrifice, if you will. Or who practices witchcraft, or a soothsayer, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who conjures spirits, or a medium, or a spiritist, or anyone who calls up the dead. So I just told you what the first thing was. The ones, there shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire. Remember that? So we need to be aware of what is being said here, because this here, child sacrifice here, is associated with the practices of witchcraft. It's associated with soothsayer, interpreting omens and sorcery and conjuring spells and medium and spiritists and calling up the dead. That's what this is associated with. They're all, tied in the same group. Today it's called abortion. And it's no different than when it was going on back then, the link by which abortion is connected to. It's connected to witchcraft. And see, here's the thing. These elitists, they have more faith than Christians do, because they believe in God and they believe in the devil. They believe in the power of God and they believe in the power of Satan. This is why they use these here rituals, these sacrifices, to tap into that spiritual world, the dark world, to extract from that, so that can give them power to be successful in this world. And they know they need this types of power, to overthrow God's power. They think they're overthrowing God's power. They can't do that, but they think they can. But they know that this is spiritual. And therefore, they take these here measures to allow them power, not just for position, but power even over people, to manipulate them and persuade them to follow them, to sway them in their direction. Sacrifice a chicken. Hillary Clinton was told by one of her peers that while she was running for presidency against Trump, that he called her and said, "Look, I just sacrificed a chicken for you. You may think that's funny or whatever, but that he was that serious, and he was doing it, on behalf of the dark world, to empower and enrich Hillary spiritually, and hope that she would win the presidency." Then God goes on to say, "For all who do these things are an abomination to the Lord, And because of these abominations, the Lord your God drives them out from before you. You shall be blameless before the Lord your God. For these nations which you will dispose listened to soothsayers, diviners, but as for you, the Lord your God has not appointed such for you. So now let's look at why the command, okay? We're going to break this down a bit. Why the command? Well, for all who does these things are an abomination to the Lord. So that's why God said don't do it, but because it's an abomination. What does the word abomination means? This word, it means an offense against God. It's one of the worst thing you can do to God or towards God. This is what angers the Lord. This is what bring this wrath within him to want to take action against such a horrific thing that is being done. Okay. Now let's look at the consequences of breaking this command. Verse 12 continues, and because of these abominations, the Lord your God drives them out from the Lord your God will drive them out from you. I'm sorry. I don't know. That's not the consequence. I don't know why I put that there. But let's move on to the third one, okay? I wrote down here, how are we to be when it comes to child sacrifice? He says in verse 13, you shall be blameless before the Lord your God. I'm going to show you the consequence in a minute. And then he says, I said, what is going on behind the scene of child sacrifice, right? For these nations which you dispossess, listen to soothsayers and diviners. So when they do the sacrifices, they open up the spirit world, and the demons and things begin to speak to them, begin to give them, directions and ideals, on what they must do in order to obtain whatever they're trying to obtain. The people, they use child sacrifice as part of their attempts to seek guidance from spiritual sources and to gain favor with their gods. And like I said, it is no different than today. Same deal going on today. Remember, I had mentioned before that during the DNC in Chicago in 2024, the Democratic Party had on their premises a Planned Parenthood mobile clinic offering free abortions through contraceptions and abortion pills. Also on the premises was a large 18-foot tall inflatable intrauterine device, or IUD, known as Frida Womb. That display aimed to empower individuals to live their lives however they chose, as emphasizing the importance of personal autonomy and the body's choice. The inflatable IUD symbolized the fight for reproductive rights and the rights of individuals to make their own choices regarding their bodies and families. And from my perspective, this is my own thoughts here, these displays, the mobile abortion clinic and the inflatable IUD device, it represents forms of offering children to a modern day Molech, drawing parallels between historical practices and contemporary expressions of reproductive independence. That's all that was, in my opinion, guys. It was just another form of worshiping Molech, taking a child, through the abortion clinic, through the abortion pills and contraceptions and whatnot, to appease the gods so that the Democratic Party could win the election. That is a truth. I truly believe this here, that they was there, that they had that unit, that mobile clinic there to help empower them by child sacrifice, blood sacrifice. What other reason would it be there for? You got to ask yourself. And it was only there for that, during that duration. ultimately, I'm almost done. I have seen many black pastors support and endorse this type of behavior, preaching and teaching to the congregation that women has a right to choose over the life of the unborn. Pastors, black pastors have been paid by the left to do this, to keep their political policies, in the mind of the people, even when they're in church. Not to let um, to let them go from this thought, but to keep it going no matter where they go. Can't even escape it in the church. Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, she played a significant role in shaping the organization's early mission. She promoted the ideal of population control, specifically targeting black communities with her efforts. During her tenure, Sager actively taught and financially supported black ministers, encouraging them to persuade young black pregnant women to visit her clinics. The goal was for these women to seek abortions, aligning with Sanger's intent to reduce the birth rates among black populations. That's the purpose of Planned Parenthood, guys. If you guys can recall an interview that Kamala Harris had, where she advocated for population control, and you wonder what type of planning was she doing? What? I'm getting a little tired, but I got to finish this. You wonder how she was planning to unpopulate the population. These practices, including consulting soothsayers and diviners, was considered detestable in the sight of God and were a key role while these nations faced judgment and were driven out. The Israelites were commanded to avoid such abominations and remain blameless before the Lord, relying instead on God for guidance and direction in their lives. But you don't hear the Democratic Party talking about the God, not the one and only true God. They'll say the word God here and there, but they don't bring God up in his truest form and who he really is. These people are, they're God haters, actually. They don't love God. They don't care about the Lord. And they don't care about God's people. Many people may not realize that homosexuality and transgenderism, both of which are supported by the Democratic Party, can be seen as alternative expressions of reproduction. These practices, while distinct from traditional abortion procedures, reflect personal choice regarding sexuality, gender identity, and the ability to form families in ways they differ from conventional norms. In this sense, they are viewed by some as other manifestations of reproductive independence, paralleling the broader debate about bodily autonomy and individual rights. Remember, God said to be fruitful and multiply. You can't be fruitful and multiply this way. You shut off that command, and that's by design. That's the purpose of Satan, and that's the purpose of the Democratic Party, to help depopulate the world. That's why they promote homosexuality. That's why they push it, so heavily, and encourages it, so that people would no longer have babies. Because they're playing along, the Democratic Party is playing along this one world agenda, okay, to depopulate the world and to have just a few people here, and those would be the elite, or there's some that they can control. And Justice Harris, running mate, Tampon Tim Walz, I finally got his name, he implemented or wanted to put tampons in the boys' bathroom. He, along with so many Democrats, believe that men, that they have a menstrual cycle, or they could have babies. Democrats, a lot of Democratic people believe this. A lot of the liberals believe this. These people are out of their mind, in a sense, for believing something like that. But think about it. Tim Walz could have been our vice president. Harris could have been our president. And they have these mindsets, and they would have implemented these things in our country. Harris also supported or advocated for all forms of identity mutilation. She supported the gay community in their efforts to mutilate young children's bodies, changing their sex orientation with or without parental consent. Again, to help depopulate the world. And the babies that are here, they're using them for sacrifices to help populate the world for demonic manifestation, to help bring in these here demons, and control the United States. And she would have done that. She would have opened up that Pandora's box, if you will, and allowed these spirits to come into our society. I know y'all don't believe this, but that's okay. And so I'm going to close with this. The Democratic Party is just one of many Babylonian systems rising up and falling in the last days. They are being exposed for the evil they represent. In fact, they too are what is being spoken of in the book of Revelation, chapter 18, verse 1 through 3, which says, "After these things I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and has become a dwelling place of demons, a prison for every foul spirit, and a cage for every unclean and hated bird. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury." Babylon symbolizes the ultimate fallen enemy of God. It symbolizes a corrupt global system, a political, commercial, and religious system that will be destroyed in the end time. Babel, the word Babel means what? Confusion, representing the mixing of humanity and defiance of God. And who's the author of confusion? Satan. God is not the author of confusion. When we have people changing their identities, when we have men acting like women, women acting like men and want to be men, when you have this governor, like I said, putting tampons in men's bathroom and so many other off-the-wall things going on, guys, this is confusion. This is not what God intended. This has nothing to do with God. This is the satanic world. And in Revelation 18 here, the angel opened up Babylon, revealed what is actually going on there, and it says that it's a place of demons, of a place of foul spirits, a cage for every unclean and hated birds. That's what Babylon consists of, and that's what the Democratic Party is. One of the sections of Babylon, that corrupt system, and that's what's incorporated in it. Demons. These things are not natural, and these people are using the demonic world to help persuade and influence people. I'm telling you. And I'm going to close here. Well, first it says in Luke chapter 8, verse 17, it says, "For there is nothing hidden that would not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that would not be made known or brought out into the open." And this is what God is doing. He's opening up all these here secret places that we didn't have privy to, and he's exposing these things. He's exposing the Democratic Party for what they really are. Now it's up to you to believe it. It's up to you, to look into these things for yourself. Or you can just remain where you are, but then there's something that's coming. If you remain where you are, and these places are indeed, the Babylonian system, because there's a warning that another angel comes on the scene, and he gives. And in verse 4, of Revelation 18, John the Revelator said, "And I heard another voice from heaven saying, 'Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, unless you receive her plagues. For her sins have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities.'" The fact that I am here and many other people are speaking out against this party, and there's so many other things that are being exposed and people are speaking out on, is because God is getting ready to commence judgment. He's seen enough slaughter in these innocent babies. He's seen enough of these here taking advantage of these young girls and having, these grown men having sex with them for ritual sakes. He's seen enough of this stuff. And he's seen enough of his people endorsing these things, voting for the people, that are pushing this evil into this world. Judgment begins first in the house of God. He's going to deal with his people. He's going to deal with those who call on his name, but do not represent him. Jesus said, many would say on that day, "Lord, Lord, did not do this in your name, did not do that in your name." Jesus said, "Depart from me, for I never knew you." You may have had my name on your lips. You may have, raised a hand here and there. But you supported some things that he is strictly against. We gotta wake up, guys. Because God is just not going to judge. He's not going to judge the world first. He's going to judge his own church, his own people. And then he goes out and judges the world. But he's exposing the world right now. He's exposing what's going on in these hidden places behind the scene. And it's up to us, to pay attention. And it's up to us, to start listening to these so-called conspiracy theories, because that is the real news in most cases. But it's time to wake up. I come here to do this here, out of my own time. And I'm not saying anything, great of myself. But, I'm compelled to do this because I believe time is winding up and God is trying to get his house in order, get his church in order. And it's time for us to rise up and be counted. This isn't a game. So he's doing his part, revealing, showing things. It's up to us now to take him at his word, or to be a Berean and go behind these things for yourself and look for these things for yourself. So, Father, I thank you, God, and I just pray that nothing of myself came out. A lot did, but that it would be taken, God, in good faith, knowing that my passion is for you, to get the truth out, to get people to see what is going on in this world, to get them to see the deception that we may be under. I don't want to exclude myself. Deception that we may be under, so that we can make a conscious decision to know evil from good, to know good from evil. And if necessary, to repent. And if not, to continue going forward, doing your will in these critical hours. Help your people not to compromise, not to be ashamed, not to be afraid to speak out against truth, to not be afraid to even to seek truth, to go into these things and find out for themselves what they may discover. We must be Bereans. We must be those that seek out the truth. You've given us this opportunity to do that. And this is what I pray for all those that are listening, all those that are under the sound of my voice, that they would take heed and that they would do their own research and to look into this party particularly and to discover that it's sinister. It has evil intent. And that's why there are so many people that are leaving it now, discovering that they were robbed of truth. And each one that come out of this party, they're like being born again. That's just the word that they say, that it's like being born again, because they've been under so much oppression, real oppression from the adversary. But now they are being set free, not necessarily if they don't come to you spiritually, but they're being set free from this political dominance that's been ruling over their lives for so many years. And they can finally see. But help them to see you. Help them not to stop there. If they don't have a relationship with you, to come to you for a true eye-opening experience. For you are the one that takes us out of darkness and into your marvelous light. So thank you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.